Hello and welcome back. I hope you had a good break. Now that we've completed a lot of our work on understanding what flexible thinking and scaffolding looks like in the classroom, and we've really nailed down what those should mean to you, I'd like to take you through an exercise to practice how these ideas might look in your classroom. So on your screen, you should be seeing a math problem, and at the very top, you should see read, draw, write. I have found that it helps students a lot to be able to just see that. It gets them in the mental thought process of a mathematician to say, these are the steps I'm going to take to solve. Okay, so as we are working through this problem, I'm going to give you some ideas of what I would do with students. Some of it's a little bit beyond the scaffolding. Some of it is things that if you know you have a class that's going to struggle more, you might do. For those of you that have stronger classes, you might say that would be too much for them, and that's great. That's what I want to see and hear you doing, because part of your scaffolding, again, is giving just enough support to those students that they can find success and reach from developing to mastering skills, okay? So if sometimes it seems like I'm giving you too many notes, I completely understand. Please, if you feel that way, let me know and we can adjust. But I do want to reach to those that might be seeing questions and having students that would struggle a little bit more, okay? So the first step in our read, write, draw, write, is, that's right, read. Thank you all who answered. For those of you that didn't, can you let me know what was the first step in our read, draw, write? Thank you. And again, that's just a simple check with you. So our question that we need to read: in 1 year, a factory used 11,650 meters of cotton, 4,950 fewer meters of silk than cotton, and 3,500 fewer meters of wool than silk. How many meters were used in all three fabrics? Now at this point, I'm going to pause just as I would with my students. I'm going to ask you to reread it to yourself and look for key mathematician words that are going to help us solve this problem. I'm going to give you an appropriate amount of pause time, maybe more, maybe less for your group, but when you see something that is going to help us solve this problem, I'd like you to go ahead and respond in the chat or raise your hand on your screen. Good, I'm excited to see lots of hands, as I know that you would be in your classroom. So would you share, if you're comfortable, letting us know a few of those words that you've seen? Let's start, Angela. Very good. Ding, ding, ding. I saw the word fewer, Angela said. When I see the word fewer, it means something to me as a mathematician. What might that mean? I'm going to call on someone that's not Angela to double check what they're thinking. Nicholas? Very good. Fewer is less. I see that word a few times. Now, something that I found is helpful for my students, if we can call those words out somehow, we might, here we'll use an arrow because this is the easiest one. Fewer, fewer again. Very good. So I know that I'm looking for less. Can you tell me what operation are we going to be using if we're trying to find less? Excellent. Can everyone repeat what Jacob said? Very good. So when we're looking for less, we're looking to use our skill of subtraction. Very good. And finally, what is the question that we're looking for here? Again, in my classroom, for me and my students, underlining that question statement is always very helpful, so they know exactly what their target is. So if we're ready, I'm going to count down. We're going to see how good we are. I'm going to go ahead and count down from 3, and we're going to read the question together. 3, 2, 1. How many meters were used in all 3 fabrics? Very good. Thank you, everyone who participated. If I'm looking for another key math word here, what might I find in that last sentence? Josephine? How many? Very good. So I know I'm going to end up with a number here. And another word that might help us a little bit as well. In all. Very good. I hope you heard Thomas. Thomas said, in all, we're looking. So that means we're going to combine and end up with a total. And we're going to use our operation of, thank you, addition. Very good. For those that didn't, what operation are we going to use at the end? Very good, addition. Let's go ahead and move on. Now that we've completed our read, we're going to go ahead and draw. Now, sometimes students that have a little bit of a need for a more immediate reinforcement, they want to check off read right away. That's up to you if that works for you in your classroom. For me, a lot of times I like to get them to leave it till the end, so that way I can tell them, have you done all these things? So I can walk them through checking. And then that way they start checking with themselves as well at the end. Did I really read that carefully? Did I draw? Did I write? And it's a great way for your students to self-check as well. Okay, so on this slide, I went ahead and did our drawing for us. I've used a model that we've been using in our examples. Can you stop and think for a minute? When you think you know, raise your hand. What kind of model is this? Okay, I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, let them know, make sure you agree. Everybody agreed? Wow, very nice, excellently done. So Tara, would you let us know what model you and your partner decided we were using? A tape diagram, very good. Now, I like to do my tape diagrams a little fancy, I guess would be a good word for it. When I'm using less, when I'm decomposing some, when I'm subtracting, I like to kind of color code, especially with these multi-word problems. When I'm just showing students that, I might even highlight or underline using a similar color, because for my students, many times that visual help them. For some, that might be overwhelming, and we as their educator and their teacher need to be able to think about the group of kiddos we're working with and make those adjustments and make those scaffolds, okay? For some of our higher kids, they don't want that, they don't need that from us, and that's okay too. So as you can see, the biggest tape I have is cotton. It was 11,650 m per meter. This is a great opportunity to stop and talk with our kiddos about those shortenings as well, okay? Those abbreviations rather. So make sure they remember that's where that M's coming from. As for silk, fewer. Always make sure they've got that subtraction sign. Okay, when I spoke to you, we made sure we knew what operation we as mathematicians were going to use. And it's important that our students know too. 4,950 fewer means that's the number we need to subtract, okay? And then what we are left with will be silk or green, okay? And then for wool, minus 3,500 meters. Okay, and it's important again to have those conversations so our students know we're not saying 3,500 is what we're left with. We're saying that's how many we need to take out of our whole. That's part of our whole. Okay, so this might be my drawing. This might be the tape diagram. Now, of course, in a classroom full of students, I would be constructing this drawing with them, and I would hope you would too. However, for our time constraints and hoping to get you guys moving on to the next thing because you have shown me that you understand, I went ahead and drew it for us. Is there any questions on this slide? Is this a time that it would be helpful to you if we paused and I gave you time to turn and talk with the neighbor? Everybody's feeling pretty good? Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, we've got another model here that we're using to solve. Very good, a T-chart. Our place value chart. This is essential for our students, especially some of those that are younger, especially for some of those who might have a difficult time arranging their thoughts and arranging their writing. Okay, so this just helps keep them organized. I remember as a student we had graph paper that we had to be in the boxes, and this reminds me a lot of that. It helps us stay neat and it helps us stay organized. So this one I did want to work through with you a little bit to show you with students. Now again, I would visit here about placing each number where it belongs in the place value chart and what that means. Again, being very careful to show that subtraction sign, okay? So I always make sure to ask my students, where do we start, from the left or the right? Our largest value or our smallest? We're gonna start from our smallest, very good. So as we subtract through, oh, that's kind of ugly, isn't it? Let's try a smaller one, sorry about that. As we subtract through, we're eventually going to hit where we need to decompose. It's a great time to stop and talk. Something that can be helpful for students that struggle with this is borrowing from a neighbor, that old saying that we remember from when we were kids. Even having them hold the numbers up in a small group and letting them go to borrow from their neighbor can be helpful. So we don't have enough hundreds. We need to decompose our thousands. Now we have 0 thousands, but we have 16 hundreds. And again, sometimes for some of our students, having the zeros up here might be beneficial. For you guys, I'm not going to do that, but I will say that that is a scaffold that's completely acceptable and very easy to do for our kiddos if we know that's what's going to make the difference. And they can eventually get to the point where they're drawing it in for themselves. As we continue through our subtraction, we get to decompose again. Okay, a lot of kiddos don't want to do that. So we have to remind them that we need to borrow. And again, this is not my best handwriting, but we're doing the best we can to stay neat. A 10 minus a 4. And we've gotten our first number. We know that this is for silk. And I might even write that over here, or the first 2 letters. How about that? So we don't have to suffer through this terrible writing. We started with our cotton. Now we've got our silk. And all we need to do now is find our wool for this part of our multi-step problem. Again, going back to what might be necessary to scaffold for your students, you might let them know that there's going to be 2 steps. First, we're going to subtract, then we're going to subtract again, and then we're going to go ahead and add at the end. And having that little bit of checklist, they can eventually start making that plan themselves. And that's incredibly helpful for some of our kiddos that might get overwhelmed with a word problem and not want to do it at all. Okay, so think about these things. What would make them comfortable to go ahead and try, and then we can slowly move away from it if needed. Okay, so as we do the second subtraction, I'm going to write it kind of quick. You guys can see the numbers. We're doing 3,500 fewer. Again, where do we start? The smallest. Very good. The smallest place value we have available. This one's nice and simple. I love to cheer with my kids when we find a problem that's simple where we don't have to decompose. That's okay. We all like when our work is a little bit easier, right? So let them celebrate a little bit. And then this is our wool, right? Maybe I'll write the whole thing in, maybe I won't. So are there any questions about the place value chart? You guys are content level experts. I'm not going to teach you anything you don't know about a place value chart at this point, but I just want to talk to you about ways that we could be using it that maybe we aren't at the current time, okay? No questions? Everybody's feeling confident. Okay, is it a time we need to turn and talk? All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and move on. You guys are doing excellent. Okay, so here I've gone ahead and simplified what we had, okay? Here was our tape diagram, excuse me, and I went ahead and put in and visually shown those numbers that we found where they belong, because I think it's important, again, for some of our students to see that visual shrinking of the tape diagram based on our subtraction, based on the steps they've taken, as well as I've put it in the place value chart in a simple, easy to follow way. Now, I wouldn't expect you to do this when you've worked through the problem with the students and they've seen you do all of the steps. I don't think it's necessary really to redo everything and make it nice and neat. But for our case here, I wanted you to see what we ended up with, okay? And again, the color coding for some of our students, and maybe even for some of you, that might be a little bit overwhelming. It might be too much. But for some of our kids, just that simple red to red, green to green, it's incredibly helpful for them, okay? And our smart boards and things like that, we have the ability to change those colors. So why not use it? In small groups, it might look like using colored pencils or highlighters, okay? And if you find that you have students that struggle with using those things appropriately, reminding them from the very beginning that these are tools and not toys sometimes can make all the difference in the world. And you'll find yourself laughing because you'll hear them reminding each other of that as well, okay? So I'd like you to take a minute to look, think, okay? We're gonna do a final checklist here, and then I'm gonna give you some time to turn and talk. I want you to think about this. What looked like it worked to you? What looked like it didn't? What do you have questions about? What are you just not gonna use? What are you absolutely gonna use? So let's finish it up, and then I'm gonna give you that time, okay? So hang in with me for just an extra minute. We know that when we are going through our redraw right, we wanna check those off, whether as the students are working or at the end. So did we read? Yes, we absolutely read. And our students would tell us, yes, we absolutely read. You read it to me too many times. Did we draw? Yeah, we drew 2 different models. That's great. Whatever strategies work for you and your group of students, that's excellent. Did we write? No. And you're going to find that your students get to that step and say, no, I didn't. I didn't write. Okay, so now, and we didn't even actually finish all of our problem, did we? And this happens, this will happen in your classroom. You'll have these conversations where suddenly you'll realize, oh goodness, we were so busy doing an excellent job that we didn't finish out our problem, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now, and then we're gonna write our final statement together. And again, I love to put us in our students' shoes, okay? It happens to all of us. So let's go ahead and finish our work. When we're adding, we get to do the exact opposite of decomposing. We're going to combine, and that's great. This is great practice for our kiddos. Again, you can use your place value discs, you can use number cubes, whatever works for your students to go ahead and work through. When you're carrying over, make sure that you delineate that for them, okay? We have an extra 1 here. Now, when I come back in here to type, I'm going to move it over. We know that we have an 11, and now we have 1 more over here because we had another 10,000 build up. So now we have our answer numerically. I prefer to have my students write it off to the side, oops, correctly, where it's more obviously seen. And I like to have them do it right by their statement. Again, another thing that you might need to do with your students to scaffold them up is give them a sentence frame to start with. Blank meters were used in all 3 fabrics. Students love when they can get to the point where they can write that statement by themselves. They love to give you ideas of how you can write that statement on the board or to come up. So give them that opportunity. You might think now of different ways to write than I will, and that's okay too. It's important to foster that in our students and let them know it's great that we don't all have to write it the same way, but we're all finding the same answer together. Okay, so let's say that there are 21,550 meters of all 3 fabrics used in total. Now, something that I'm going to change about this, and this is something, again, that's kind of a personal preference. It might not be confusing to you. It might not be for your students. But I don't like of all 3. I like there are 21,550 meters of fabric used in total. When I say in all 3, it makes me think that I had 21,550 of each of them. And that's confusing to me. So again, that's a conversation you might have with your students. And this is a completely valid statement of solving too, a solution statement as well. Okay, so we can now check off that we've written our answer as a number. We've written our answer in a number statement. I'm gonna pause here. I would love for you to turn and talk in your group with a neighbor, write things down on a Post-it, write things down in the chat so that we can talk. And what I'm asking you again and inviting you again to think about is, what did we do that worked? What did we do that you would like to take back to your classroom? What do you still have more questions about? Think about your students. I love for you to say, well, that's all well and good, but I have little Jimmy and that's great. We can all learn from that. And if it's not something that I can answer within the time constraints we have, I'd love to visit with you after about it. Okay, so keep those coming. I'm gonna go ahead and pause, and I'm gonna let you take this time to talk, and then we're gonna reconvene one more time so that we can visit about what you think and where you're going with this. Now again, right before I let you go, I promise I'm going to, I didn't teach you this the way that I would students. I tried to make that very clear. And if you would like me to teach it as I would students, I'm more than happy to do that. But again, I like to respect you as content qualified educators. And I don't want to go through teaching you a lesson that you've known for a good long while, okay? So I'm going to pause now, as promised, and I'm going to let you speak.